It had never even occurred to me that in my country anything could ever change, let alone that it could disappear. No one expected it, neither children nor adults. There was a complete impression that everything was forever. These were the words of a musician who was reflecting on the fall of the Soviet Union. But they echo a sentiment that many of us in Gen Z are feeling today as well. That sentiment is that we are living in a system that is in very clear and obvious decline. A system that does not serve our interests in any way, shape, or form. But that we are also completely powerless to do anything to change this system politically. You take the economic pressures that are pushing down on our generation, that are probably pushing down on you right now. The housing crises and the political system that feels completely unresponsive to your needs. All of these things feel like permanent features of reality. You say to yourself, well, that's just the way things are, and that's the way things will continue to be. And complaining about these things is allowed, it's even encouraged, but the idea that anything could ever actually change seems impossible. It feels as though nothing could ever really change for the better in the future. There is a widespread sense among our generation that nothing ever happens. Now, as a result of this hellish reality that we find ourselves in, Gen Z are undergoing something of a psychological catastrophe. We've stopped imagining how our future could look better. Now, it may surprise you to learn that we are not the first group of people to ever experience this psychological phenomenon. In fact, it even has a name: normalization. And today, I want to tell you all about normalization, this new psychological phenomenon that we are going through. I want to tell you about where it came from, how it systematically destroys people's hopes and dreams, and why it's reared its head among Gen Z people again today. But most importantly of all, and what I really want to focus on in this video, is what you can actually do as an individual person to press back against this phenomenon and rekindle your own capacity to dream and imagine your future better. So first, to properly understand the psychology of normalization and why it's popping up among young people today, you have to go back to where it first started, and that is in the Soviet Union. Now, I can sense a lot of people watching this video just flung their hands up in the air being like, well, I didn't come here for a history lesson. I don't live in a dictatorship. I'm not under threat of going into the gulags. How is this going to be in any way relevant to my life? And it's a fair criticism, okay? But my point in this video is that the psychology of what people went through towards the end of the Soviet Union and the psychology that young people are exhibiting, what they're actually showing us today, is very, very similar. I'm not suggesting for a second that the political systems are similar or that we are in some kind of late stage capitalism. If you want a brain dead political take, you can go and watch Hassan Piker. He's down the hall and to the left. Okay, I'm only going to say that for the idiots once. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get into what this psychology of normalization actually is and why it only happened towards the end of the Soviet Union. Why specifically then? And why this is related to what we are experiencing psychologically today. To do all of this, we'll have to do a quick overview of the Soviet Union, starting with the death of Stalin in 1953. Now, Stalin is, of course, the person that you probably most associate with the Soviet Union, and most of the atrocities connected to the Soviet Union are connected to Stalin. The gulags, the massacres, the corruption, most of this happens during his time, and the people who lived under Stalin largely lived in fear. It was total control and they had no agency whatsoever. However, after Stalin, the new Soviet leadership basically said to people, lads, that was bad. We need to reverse this a little bit. We need to give people a little bit more agency. We still want them to be communists, but we need to give them a little bit more freedom. We have to stop flinging people into the gulag left, right, and center. So that is what happened. Now, what happened as a result of that was that people began to express their opinions. They started to use their new agency to affect the system around them. Very, very quickly, there were violent uprisings, like in Hungary in 1956 and Czechoslovakia in 1968, where the whole population basically came together and said, lads, we have enough of communism, we don't want this anymore, we want our system to change so that it serves us, so that it serves the people in this country. The Soviet Union wasn't having any of this. They crushed both of the rebellions with tanks. Now, they wanted to put an end to these kind of uprisings, so they introduced normalization. Normalization started out as a policy to prevent further uprisings, but this wasn't some kind of classic government control where they constantly used tanks and constantly used military to scare people into compliance, the kind where everybody gets dragged off into the gulag for no particular reason. No, this was something far more subtle and perhaps even more effective in its ability to control people. Because what normalization did was it completely removed the capacity for ordinary people in countries like Czechoslovakia and Hungary to imagine how their future could ever be changed for the better. The new message from the Communist Party to the people around this time was something a little bit like this. We know you hate communism. We know you hate us. But we are here to stay. We've got the power, we've got the tanks, we've got the money. So if you just shut up and play along with the system, we will guarantee you a quiet life. You'll have a roof over your head, you will have food on the table, you'll even have a job. Not a good job, but you'll have a job. Just stop trying to imagine how things could be different. Stop trying to fix the system that you're in. Leave that to us, leave that to the Communist Party. Stop dreaming, stop questioning, stop imagining how you could change things. Now, one of the leaders of the communist countries around this time, Gustav Hujak, described this New Deal absolutely perfectly when he said, "A normal person wants to live quietly, and my party wants to safeguard the quiet life." Now, this New Deal, this quiet life, had an absolutely devastating psychological impact that played out on people over the next 2 decades. People completely internalized the fact that change was not possible. They'd already tried it. They tried to have violent uprisings and these got crushed. No matter whether you supported the regime or you were against it, you as an individual were not allowed to change things. Under this new system, you would go to school and you would learn whatever was in the curriculum that year, whatever propaganda they were serving to you. Then you would get a job, most likely a job that you were overqualified for. But you would go in and you would do your work anyway, depressed and all as you were. The system around you, it functions, but not perfectly, not efficiently. It just sort of carries on in a very mediocre way. And this system is all around you all the time. This system, it feels permanent. And you know deep down that there's absolutely nothing that you can do to change it. Now, to draw this back to today, I think there's a uniquely depressing quality to realizing that your reality right now as a Gen Z person is very, very bleak. You can't imagine how the future could look better for you. Most young people, when they think about the future, it does not look good. And there is, of course, a sense among many, many Gen Z people that they feel very powerless to do anything to change this. They don't even really want to rebel against the system because what else is there? What could replace it? We can't even imagine this. We no longer have this ability to generate a positive vision of the future. Now, back in the late 70s, back in the communist times, the Czech playwright Václav Havel, he described this psychological phenomenon in his work, The Power of the Powerless, which I have here behind me. Now, in this very short work, Havel writes about a greengrocer, a man who runs a grocery store. And what this man does every day, without fail, without thinking about it, is he puts up a sign in his window that says, "Workers of the world, unite." Now, the man doesn't do this because he believes in the message behind the sign. He does it because everybody else does. And he knows that if he doesn't put this sign in his window, then the communist police are going to come knocking on his doorstep and they're going to drag him away. He's going to lose his business and he's going to go to prison. When people hear about this story, they tend to focus on the fact that the greengrocer is very compliant. He is living inside a lie. He puts up this sign in his shop window that he doesn't believe in, and he's forced to do this every single day. But I think something that gets overlooked in this story is that the greengrocer has completely stopped imagining how things could ever be any different as well. And that is the essence of normalization. It is living in a system that makes ordinary people like you and like me gradually forget that change was ever possible, that anything could ever happen. Now, my big claim in this video is that normalization is back and you are living through it today. It is the subtle erosion of hope, the creeping apathy, the sense that nothing ever happens. These traits are not unique to a communist dictatorship. The psychology today is the same. Most Gen Z people don't imagine the future becoming any better for themselves because the system that we live in demoralizes us. It makes us lose hope. And it does this by giving us endless problems that we didn't create and we have basically no practical power to affect, to try and change. Now let's not shy away from calling these problems out. Here's exactly what is causing this sense of despair among young people today. First, you have the hell economy and the housing crises. For many, there is a brutal reality that home ownership is basically a fantasy and that well-paying jobs that are stable, that make it so that you can afford to live, are becoming increasingly scarce. And both of these things have created a massive hustle culture among Gen Z that demands that you work infinitely harder to achieve the same level of success and prosperity that was much more accessible to your parents and grandparents. The dream of getting ahead feels increasingly out of touch, and it pushes people in Gen Z to just try and survive rather than try and achieve anything spectacular or get a leg up on the social ladder. Now, the next thing to consider is the political system that we live in. We are in a political gridlock. Us young people, we protest, we vote, and we all know that we need change. Young people who are left-wing and right-wing are saying that change needs to happen for us young people very, very soon. And often, despite very powerful youth movements on the left wing and on the right wing, nothing really ever shifts or changes. Policies get drafted up by the boomers who live inside in the institutions and have done for several years, and these policies benefit them. They're unresponsive to the needs of Gen Z, millennials, or Gen Alpha even. And the message that we receive as a result of this is that we are allowed to complain, encouraged to complain even. But the possibility of achieving actual real-world change that benefits us, that is off limits. My own personal idea is that that is what's driving a lot of deranged young people to despair. That's where we are getting a lot of the more recent and tragic political violence from. Now, for me, the final sign of normalization among Gen Z is the amount of information that we are exposed to as young people. We have on our social media feeds these 24/7 news cycles that exist to churn out disaster after disaster, outrage after outrage, headline after headline telling you why things are getting worse for Gen Z. We are constantly informed and constantly aware of all of the world's problems, like the whole world. And this contributes to a great sense of being overwhelmed, of being emotionally burned out, and it gives you a real sense of helplessness. If for a moment to imagine how this works, put yourself in the shoes of a 20-something-year-old follower of Charlie Kirk. You would have seen that devastating video of him getting shot in the head by a rifle the other day. And you would have been a young fan of his, and you see your political hero, the person that you put your hope for the future in, bleed out and die right there on a video in front of you. He's gone. He's not coming back. Now, I personally was not in agreement with everything that Charlie Kirk stood for politically, but he was a good man, and seeing that video
it horrified me. So I can only imagine a young person who sees that, who loves Charlie Kirk, who's riled up by his ideas and who wants to make a difference because of Charlie Kirk. You no longer have that light there in your world. That's what the algorithm does. It normalizes crises, it normalizes dysfunction, and it really normalizes this chaos that we are now living in. Now, all of these things, these attitudes, are completely normalized among Gen Z people. Gen Z people feel as though they'll never be able to retire. They feel as though the political system doesn't serve them and that voting won't change anything. They feel quite demoralized by the constant news cycle telling them to be from their social media algorithms. And that is all contributing to the fact that we have stopped dreaming. We've stopped imagining how the future could be any better. We are not being directly repressed like people were in the Soviet Union, but we are largely depressed and demoralized. There is a sense that our problems as a generation are too big for us, and the political system itself is too self-serving. Its efforts are going to be futile to change anything. Making political decisions has become pointless, not just for Gen Z, but for most people, because national political machines and the bureaucrats inside of them serve global economic security and powerful lobby groups over the political will of ordinary people like you and like me. Most people today, especially the young, simply accept this. We are not happy, not particularly rebellious, but resigned to our fate. And the system that we all live in, it can't generate any new ideas, any new visions for how things could actually change or get better in the future. And this will come at a cost. Because when society and when people stop imagining alternatives, the system that we all live in, it does not adapt well to change. It doesn't generate any new ideas or any vision for where society can go. And as a result, it will become a stagnant system. A system that we all live in that feels as though nothing can ever happen. And the status quo and stability are maintained always at all costs. So there it is, that's the psychology. If you're a young person living in the Western world right now, you are living under your own personal version of normalization. You have been told for the entire time that you've been an adult that these crazy housing prices and inflated rents, well, they're just market forces. That job insecurity is just the new normal. You are told that energy shortages are coming and it's just something that you'll have to get used to. You are told that democracy must be defended at all costs, even though it seems increasingly unresponsive to the needs of the people who live under it. However, and this is the point of the video where I want to be a little bit more hopeful, because there is a vital distinction. You are not living in a closed system like the people in the Soviet Union would have been. With the internet, you have the ability to work around the system, to live on its edges, to build up a non-fiat income and to live largely independent of the state. Now, this is very difficult, of course. I don't say that this is easy and that everybody should do it, but it is possible. In addition to this, the forces that could destabilize this modern system that we all live in and that we all hate are also already at work. Everybody can point to the decline all around them. You can see the inequality for young people, not just for Gen Z. You have experienced the rapid technological innovation, the creation of the iPhone, the widespread use of the internet, the development of AI, and these things are going to continue. We don't know how they're going to affect this system that we live in. There's also an impending demographic collapse. People are very, very old in most developed countries, and most people are not having children either. And this is really going to destabilize the system that we live in. There's also, and I'm absolutely not encouraging anybody to engage in any of this, the possibility for violence, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, people will, unfortunately, as they despair, they will get drawn towards more radical solutions. Because again, the system evidently doesn't serve them. And if they have no hope, they'll take matters into their own hands. Now, I've already made another video suggesting why that is not a good idea. I do not endorse that in the slightest. What I am saying, though, is that it is something that is going to happen. Something will eventually happen that destabilizes this system. And my opinion is that we should avoid falling into the pit of despair as young people until this does. Finally, how do we begin to dream again? Us people, you and me as individuals. How do we resist this insidious modern psychology of normalization? First, you have to recognize it. That's why I made this video, so people can put a name on this feeling. That they don't just have to accept their apathy or their despair as a personal failing. I want you to see that feeling for what it is. It's a response to the systems that want you to believe that nothing can change. I want you to name this, I want you to call it out, and I want you to understand its mechanisms, why you feel this way. Second thing you can do to beat normalization. This is a radical act. I hope you're ready. It is to change from a doubter to a believer. Now. This involves realizing that the systems that shape your life today do not need to crush your spirit. If you remember the greengrocer from earlier for a second, the true tragedy of this story for me wasn't that he kept putting the sign up in the window every single day. It was that the greengrocer completely forgot how to imagine that the future could be any different. He forgot that dreaming was possible. And often the most powerful form of protest isn't overt rebellion, it isn't nihilism. Sometimes it's simply the audacious, terrifying, exhilarating act of imagining a different world. A world beyond the narrative. A world where your biggest problems do in fact have solutions. Maybe these are long-term solutions, but they do exist. Now, the third thing that you must do if you want to beat normalization in your own life is you have to remember that this is not just an intellectual exercise. There are practical things that you need to do in order to overcome this. I know my last point was very romantic, it was very flowery about turning from doubter to believer, but that alone is not enough. If you hate the system that you live in, what you must do is you must get educated, get connected, get inside it, and change it. Change the system for the better. And I'm not saying here to become a political martyr or a political activist. That's too cheap, that's too easy, that's the easy way out of this situation. It'll make you feel good in the moment, but long term, it's not going to have any benefit. I am telling you to become someone with power and decision-making influence. Become a lawyer, a businessman, a media executive, an educator. Because when you think about it, what is real power? Is it really a Bugatti? Is it really escaping the matrix? Or is it the power to take the matrix, get inside it, and inflict your own values on it? Think about what we're going through right now. The system is crushing young people because the system is full of old boomers. Boomers who have boomer values. The system promotes boomer values. And what you need to do as a young person is realize the boomers don't have long left. They're gonna start dying off. And their values inside the system need to be replaced by someone. You need to get inside the system and you need to drive your ideas into it. Pump the system full of your ideas. If that's not a sexy idea, I don't know what is. Now I'd like to leave you with an analogy that I think sums up the entire idea of this video. And I hope it will leave you feeling a little bit more light than despair in your life. And if you like this analogy, then please go ahead, subscribe, share the video to people that you like, and stick around. You know, I try to give you a little bit of light, a bit of levity at the end of this video, and you should do the same for me. I'm a person too. I need hope in my life as well. Okay? This is a transaction. I hope you're aware of it. Anyway, here's the analogy. As this society is in decline, as this system appears to be on its way out, the seeds of the system that replaces it need to be sown, and they need to grow. If you think about Gen Z people as if we are the seeds, we have all fallen on very rough ground. Some of us have fallen into cracks in concrete walls. It's incredibly difficult for us to grow up and to flower. But there is a lack of competition for new ideas, for this new system that must inevitably come up. And though it is difficult, it is absolutely worth, while you're down there, while you're in the concrete, it is worth looking for that little ray of sunlight that you need in order to grow. And you need to show them. You need to show everyone what beautiful flowers can grow up when the seeds of this generation are thrown down into the concrete. Who knows how impressive that could be?